Is my autofocus doing what it's supposed to be doing? Okay, fine. Bit of a more serious video than usual. I was a lot on Twitter over the last few days while I was in bed with a horrible cold, which I still have. I prepped a lot for this so that I don't look super sick, but not feeling all that well. But I was on Twitter and some things went down that I had a lot of feelings about, and then subsequently also thoughts. Today I want to talk about the recent Jack Howard controversy. If you don't know what happened, don't worry, I will give you the recap. Now I know, I mean, at least to me, it feels like a bit of a hiccup, and the whole hashtag JackHowardisoverparty seems to have already died down a lot, like there's not much going on there anymore. But it made some ripples, it made some waves, and I felt like I could sort of use a conversation about this specific instance to make a bit of a broader point about the way people communicate and outrage. Please watch this till the end. If you don't watch it till the end, you don't really get to play in the comment section because you will literally not know what you're talking about. If you do play in the comment section, please play nicely and don't scream at people or call them names. So let's start by looking at what exactly happened. A number of tweets have been deleted because Jack was getting a little tired of people shitting on him in his mentions, which is understandable, but I was actually online and following it while the tweets were coming in, so I was there, saw it. So let me tell you how this started. Jack tweeted joking criticism of people complaining about not enough original Hollywood productions, but then simultaneously also completely ignoring Mother, which stars Jennifer Lawrence. Then someone replied that people dislike Mother because it stars Jennifer Lawrence and because people hate her. Jack asked why people hate JLaw, and this person replied that she said and done some problematic things. Jack said he'd never really seen any problematic behavior from JLaw that warranted so much hate, so he asked to be linked to some examples. The person Jack was talking to provides a Tumblr post with a list of the problematic things JLaw has said and done. Jack looks at this list and feels like, no, these are not behaviors that warrant hatred towards Jennifer Lawrence, and basically literally says as much. And that's where the issue begins. Two things happened. One, people got upset that Jack didn't acknowledge that JLaw is problematic as fuck, and that he also went on to kind of nuance some of her behaviors, saying things like she blurted something out in a moment and that it was because she was awkward. Two, when someone dragged Woody Allen into it, things got ugly when Jack basically argued that one does not need to approve of the behavior of the artist to be able to enjoy the artist's work. And in doing so, he asserted that he did not agree with Woody Allen's lifestyle. People jumped to the conclusion that with lifestyle, Jack was referring to allegations of child sexual abuse towards Woody Allen, but Jack later clarified he was actually referring to Woody Allen's marriage to his much younger adoptive daughter. But then it also didn't get better when he referred to the child abuse allegations as a grey area. So that's in short a bit of the situation that went down. I mean, it basically started because Jack asked, well, I mean, what is this hate towards Jennifer Lawrence? Someone replied with, well, this is what she did. Jack saying, well, I don't think that's a good enough reason to hate someone for. And then some people lost their figurative shit. So I feel that there's been a lot of unfair outrage and misinterpretation and misrepresentation of people's points here, that there generally was a lot of people not knowing how to rationally approach complex issues and how to stick with the actual conversation. To be fair, I did run a poll to see what people thought of this whole Jack Howard situation. It might be a bit biased because a lot of people who follow my timeline sort of tend to adopt my points after I explain them, and to be fair, I had been tweeting extensively about the whole thing before I ran the poll. So in conclusion of the poll, most people were like, I mean, I don't think Jack did anything wrong, or at least like I think other people overreacted to the situation. But there were a good number of people who actually reacted with, I think Jack Howard's scum now. Now that kind of extreme outrage is not the majority of the reactions, obviously, but it is very visible and it is very destructive, so I think that there might be a couple of valuable lessons to be learned from the situation. So now that we got the gist of what happened, let's pick this apart and analyze it a little, shall we? Let's tackle the JLaw bit first. To fully understand why Jack's refusal to outright condemn JLaw upset so many people, I think we need to specify what kind of behavior we're talking about. I'll leave a more complete list in the description below. If you're not aware of certain things that JLaw has said or done, please click that, go read that, pause this video, we'll wait for you. Okay, so in short, we're talking about things like referring to OCD as a quirk, perpetuating negative stereotypes about bisexuality, cultural insensitivity, You get the picture. Now, what I think happened here is that some people feel so justified in their outrage towards Jennifer Lawrence and that her actions make her a bad person or even evil, as I've seen some people say, that they assume that anyone made aware of her transgressions yet who fails to cast her out is automatically a bad person as well. A bad person who in the very least doesn't care about social issues, or worse, subscribes to the very same anti-progressive ideas attributed to JLaw. For me, that raises two questions. One, is Jennifer Lawrence actually a bad person as some people have insisted? And two, does a lack of condemnation of problematic behavior automatically indicate approval for anti-progressive ideas? Now, I don't think that there is an objective answer to the first question of, is Jennifer Lawrence actually a bad person? Personally, no, I don't think Jennifer Lawrence is a bad person. I don't think that the things she said and done are intentionally bigoted. I don't think JLaw actually hates trans people, or that she actually thinks bisexuality isn't real, or that she actually doesn't recognize that mental health issues are serious. Do I think that she's said and done things that are ignorant and insensitive? Yes, absolutely. But here's the deal. Everyone is problematic. Everyone is biased about something. There isn't a single person in the world who doesn't occasionally say or do something that isn't entirely objective or empathic or morally pure. The vast majority of people have grown up with some kind of privilege that leaves them with all kinds of blind spots. That can lead them to say unnuanced, ignorant, insensitive, unfactual, stereotypical bullshit because they lack the experience and awareness to know better. And even once you do know better, years of habit just make for unintentional slip-ups, no matter how hard you try. I think people can be made aware of those things and invited to reflect on them. I think we can have conversations about them and work towards broadening our perspective and increasing our knowledge. But I don't think that the way to do that is boundless emotional outrage, boycotts and hate. So no, I don't personally think that JLaw is a bad person. I think she's flawed and she has blind spots like the rest of us. And I don't think that the way for her to grow from that is to be constantly despised and shat on with zero nuance all the time. The one janitor recently made a good video about how people don't change overnight, in which he also talks about the steps required to actually achieve change. I'll leave that in the cards somewhere, so go check that out. To move on to the second question, does not condemning problematic behavior actually indicate approving of anti-progressive ideas? I'd say that's a whole other matter, and it is far less one of mere personal opinion. And I'm asking this question because it appeared to be exactly the thing that got the ball rolling on this whole controversy. People shitting on Jack for not condemning JLaw's problematic behavior and reading it as him condoning her alleged bigoted ideas. Whether the answer to this question is yes or no largely depends on one thing. Is the behavior we're talking about debatable, or is it not? Allow me to illustrate. On the one hand, we have PewDiePie paying some Indian guys to hold up a sign that says "Kill all Jews," to illustrate the ridiculousness of being able to just pay people to do something that outrageous. On the other hand, we have Felix letting the N-word slip in the obvious form of an insult. The Jew joke that he made. Anti-Semitic? Now, some of you may be like, duh, that's anti-Semitic. But you're frankly drawing a conclusion that is not objectively there. Felix's target was obviously not Jews. Now, you may argue that the intent might not have been anti-Semitic, but that the result was, and that the result is all that matters. Others will argue that intent is relevant in this scenario. What kind of humor is acceptable is up for debate. People who therefore didn't outright condemn Felix and defended him during the onslaught of mainstream media, taking this out of context and calling him a Nazi, don't necessarily subscribe to anti-Semitic ideas. I was one of the people who actually defended Felix against accusations of having Nazi sympathies, despite the fact that I did think that the joke was inappropriate and that the result did make it anti-Semitic despite the intent not being so. The N-word comment, on the other hand, not so debatable. The word was obviously dropped in a derogatory way. It was intended to express negativity, which was also made extra evident by Felix later correcting himself to say asshole. And the difference between those situations is also quite evident in the reactions of Felix himself and the reactions of his surroundings. Where in the first scenario, people like Ethan Klein, Philip DeFranco actually mostly focused on criticizing mainstream media for taking a joke out of context and jumping to conclusions. In the second case, they've both expressed that there was no excuse, that there was no context that could have defended Felix's use of the N-word. Felix himself, in the first case, put up a middle finger to the mainstream media and refused to acknowledge that he was actually feeding into Nazi ideas. Whereas in the second case, he fully acknowledged without excuses that what he did was wrong and inexcusable. Now, when we look at JLaw's transgressions, all of those are in fact debatable, in the sense that all of them could have been said or done out of ignorance or unawareness, because at times they might have been just cases of unfortunate wording, because they might have been bad attempts to lighten a situation with humor. There is no indication that she was intentionally being derogatory or malicious towards any group. This to me also explains, for example, Jack's comment about her being awkward and blurting something out. As Jack's met JLaw several times, and I'm assuming that probably the rest of us haven't, I think that he's in the better position to assess that. I also don't think I'm wrong when I say that a good number of us have said and done stupid things because we were awkward or anxious in a situation. Does this mean that nobody should confront Jennifer Lawrence about her behavior and why it might be problematic? Of course not. But the initial point of what went down on Twitter was literally just Jack saying like, no, I don't think that these types of comments and behavior warrant actual hate. And then getting dogpiled by people who thought he was disgusting for not thinking JLaw was outright despicable. Did he, over the course of this outrage, go on to make some comments that sounded a little snarky? Yeah. Probably. But put yourself into the situation of dozens of people constantly having at you for not thinking that JLaw is the devil incarnate, and then twisting your words and repeatedly coming at you while you're literally responding with things like, we disagree, that's fine, you can have your opinion, this is just how I feel, I don't want to have a debate or a fight over this. I mean, I don't know about you, but in that situation, I'd probably lose my cool. A little bit. Anyway, what's more, even if behavior is outright wrong and not debatable, condemning that behavior doesn't necessarily have to mean also condemning that person. Sometimes people fuck up. Sometimes people do shit they later regret, and at that point it depends on how they deal. I've called women sluts as an insult in my life while being feminist and perfectly aware of things like slut shaming and all that jazz. There was no excuse for that. I messed up. I was wrong. Now, I have the luxury of not being a public figure. I have the luxury of having friends who know that this is out of character for me and that I made a mistake in anger and that I'm aware of that. I have the luxury of not constantly being held to the ridiculous standard of always having to be hypersensitive and aware and composed and rational. The luxury of not having millions of people watch my every step. Of not having every badly worded or uninformed opinion forever on public record. And now I'd like to do an exercise with you. I'd like all of you to think about every inconsiderate remark you've ever made. About every little bias you may have had before you learned better, or may still have. Think of every time you got pissed off because you didn't understand why someone was angry with you and only learned why and what you did wrong much later. Think of every time you called someone a name, every time you were rude to your parents when they didn't really deserve it. Are you thinking of them? Good. Now imagine that the entire world is aware of all of that, and that with every step you take and every word you say, there's always a bunch of people at the ready to tell you that they hate you and that you're literal scum for having done all of those things. Congrats, because you're now JLaw and a lot of other problematic faves. If we're going to talk about Woody Allen, I would like to issue a content warning. If you're sensitive to topics of sexual violence and child abuse, please do what you need to look after yourself. If that means not watching this part, don't watch. If that means watching it later, do that. If it means watching it with a friend or a blanket or a teddy bear or a hot cup of cocoa or planning yoga after this, just, do what you need to be comfortable, okay? Now, about this Woody Allen stuff, I also did a poll asking the people who did say, well, Jack is scum for this whole situation, what it was exactly that bothered them most. Was it the JLaw comments? Was it the Woody Allen comments? Or was it something else? And the majority of the people said that what actually bothered them most was the Woody Allen comments. But I actually feel like those are a bit more straightforward than the JLaw situation. So what happened was someone dragged Woody Allen into the discussion, and Jack clarified that yes, he did love his work, but no, he did not agree with his lifestyle. And what happened was pretty cut and dry. Because the first Woody Allen controversy that springs to mind for most people is the allegations of child abuse, a lot of people jumped to the conclusion that Jack had just referred to child molestation as a lifestyle. Yikes. Now, these allegations were not what he was referring to, but let's, for the sake of the argument, say that I understand why people made that assumption. Let's, for the sake of the argument, even say that I initially made that assumption. I did make that assumption. So sure, fine, I made the same assumption, but my initial reasoning about this was as follows. There are only so many characters in a tweet. The easiest way to refer to the collective of someone's opinions and behaviors and choices is probably, yeah, lifestyle. Is it the best word, the most appropriate word? Probably not, but my idea was just like, okay, you need a short way to express this. And I mean, it doesn't really cut it entirely, but you know, people probably get what you mean. People did not. They didn't. They did not, no. So anyway, that was me assuming that this word was chosen because it was an easy, relatively short umbrella term for the entirety of controversial and alleged disgusting things surrounding Woody Allen. It seemed like a far more plausible idea than flippin' Jack Howard saying something like, oh, I think molesting children is a lifestyle choice. And excuse me, but I think that the fact that some people's initial reaction was in fact, oh my god, Jack Howard says sexual abuse is a lifestyle choice. That is very concerning to me. I think that is an indication of a severe lack of capacity to think critically and rationally about the world around you. This is an extremely damaging assumption to make. If you're a person who did this, please be aware that you're assigning a very extreme, dangerous opinion to a person who, on average, has a pretty solid record on the decency scale. You jumped on that in a frenzy, and not for a second did your brain go, oh, hold on, this is pretty extreme. Maybe I should approach this rationally and make sure that I'm actually getting the right idea here. But either way, Jack later clarified that he was referring to Alan's marriage. Obviously, that led people to wonder why Jack wasn't talking about the child abuse allegations against Woody Allen. Jack was brave enough to dive into that cesspool of hell, and he was honest enough to comment that there has been no conviction that this is a grey area and that there are things both for and against these allegations being true. Now let me be abundantly clear. I'm a rape survivor. I've advocated for rape survivors. I've written pieces on sexual violence that have been published in national newspapers. My understanding of the importance of believing victims' accounts of events is crystal clear. My understanding that we sadly live in a culture where explicit skepticism towards allegations against, for example, Bill Cosby made the lives of his victims exceedingly harder is rock solid. But so is my understanding of living in a world where we demand convictions without trial. A world in which we demand of other people that they explicitly accept a verdict that has never been made lest we punish them for their caution. I would like to have the time and space to have a lengthy, deep conversation about this, which does the complexity and duality of the situation justice. But that is, right now, not the point here. The point here is that there is a profound difference between believing that allegations are automatically false and publicly proclaiming that judgment as to deter due process and being unwilling to be judge, jury, and executioner in a situation you can't possibly hope to objectively assess. And especially when you're a public figure, that is a very dangerous position to find yourself in. Jack did the latter, and I can't objectively fault him for that. Don't treat him as if he did the first. My gut feeling about this is bad. It feels bad. It feels horrible. I don't like it one bit, but whether or not Woody Allen is actually a child molester is, at this point, still debatable. And on that note, what's also very debatable is can and should we separate art from the artist? When asked, I will say that I am convinced that because of what we know, that probably, yes, the allegations towards Woody Allen are true. I will always condemn any attempt to silence victims of sexual assault and outright assumptions that they're lying. But I will forever defend someone's right to stay neutral in a matter that has not been settled through appropriate legal proceedings. Woo! Okay, that was much. My throat is not thankful for this. But anyway, let this hopefully teach you not to jump to conclusions, not to let your emotions ruin your rationality, and to not argue under the assumption that your horrible interpretation of what's going down is actually accurate. Let this hopefully also teach you not to assume that everyone else's fuck-ups are evil while conveniently forgetting about your own. Let it please teach you to approach life with patience and consideration. I know that this was long, but I do feel that this was a very clear example of the toxic hypersensitivity and lack of rational discourse I've been seeing among progressive people more and more lately. Figured it was time to say something. If you made it to the end here, thank you. I hope it was at least mildly interesting. Over there is less heavy stuff if you need to wind down. If you're new here and you haven't subscribed and you'd like to, there's a convenient little button somewhere over here. I love you. Be nice to each other in the comments and stay magical. Bye.